I like the word of Sergei about uncertain Russia, because for sure Ukraine is very certain. You know, yesterday was a nice day when I came here and I had 2 interviews with the press, and the day started with a night resignation of the second richest person in Ukraine from the governor position in one of the regions. And he was, you know, very much a big factor for security in that region in Dnipropetrovsk. Later, 2 government officials were prisoned, or not prisoned, but arrested during the cabinet ministry meeting online, with online translation, this on TV. Again, 2 ex-ministers in 2014, the prosecutor office started an investigation about the corruption. US sent to us the armed cars yesterday, and Mr. President was very, you know, lucky to be also to try them yesterday. And Moody's downgraded Ukraine to the 2nd lowest level in the world. So I asked my communication people, could you please prepare me a little bit better day, you know, just to have something to discuss with the journalist in Austria. And on top of that, you know, from my you know, regional city, from Odessa, the semi-private paratroops left the city when they were protecting the city in the past, like a parallel police, and they left the city after resignation of Mr. Kolomoisky. So it's an interesting period. While the friend of mine wrote in Facebook, it's a common day in Ukraine, nothing interesting, so we can go to sleep. And this is the reality of Ukraine today. I will give you some small, you know, picture, very rough picture of Ukraine, because this is very, very dynamic. And I would start with, for sure, we were not agreeing with Sergei where to start, but political economy is more important today than macroeconomy in Ukraine, and I would add here the war economy, and for sure the financial sector. And in the political economy for us is, since I'm representing the central bank, for us is important how to neutralize the effect of politics on the financial sector and how to minimize the effect of the war and the military conflict on the east on the macroeconomy and the financial sector. While in macroeconomy, for sure, assuming that the war could be one day at least frozen or stopped, how to stabilize and ensure, how to stabilize the economy and ensure macroeconomic stabilization. And another much bigger task for us, and this is where now we're working a lot, is how to get away from the Soviet past. And this is one of the war we have today. And also not only from Soviet past, but post-Soviet traps which we already created during the last 20 years of Ukraine. In the financial sector is a question very much linked with macroeconomy and the war, how to stabilize the financial sector and what are the future potential growth points for the economy. And definitely for us is important the financial sector future strategy for Ukraine. And you know, the Austrian banks are very big lenders in Ukraine, and the Raiffeisen and Unicredit are among the largest banks in Ukraine today. I will start with one slide, which I kindly ask you, and I will probably delete this later from the deck, if possible. So I want to discuss it with you, maybe not even like a government official. Which 3 parties were present during Maidan period in February? Do you know who were present on, who were fighting? Okay, parties, I mean the participants in general, so more bodies. For sure, there was the ex-power, which was represented by Mr. Yanukovych. There was opposition that time, which was represented by several politicians, which are also currently in the politics, and there was a civil society. It is interesting to mention that these 3 parties had different targets during the revolution. The target for the power was to retain the power and to keep the old system working. In old system, the corruption system and the system of relationship, oligarch economy model. This was the target for the ex-power. What was the target for opposition? How do you think? What do you think? To become the power. yeah, and to keep the system working. What was the target of a civil society? To change the system, and definitely not become the power. And this is one of the interesting phenomena of the last year, during 2014, because I will show now how it was reflected in the political situation. Because unfortunately, the civil society was not institutionalized, so it was really the big growth of internal Ukrainian identity which led to the change of the regime. But these people never dreamed after that to become the power. There were some individuals inside who became the deputies in the parliament, some people like myself from the business area who wanted to change, to help to change the system. But in general, I mean, I didn't want to go to the central bank. Sorry for that. I was called by the governor of the central bank and said, we need you, and IMF called me and said, we need you in Ukraine to do it. And I said, I have a job, and you know, my former boss is in this room. And the answer was, we can call your boss and you will not have a job. Okay, because we need you in the country. So this was for me, like, for many people, like a duty call. But this is the very much fundamental for the change, because many people did not understand that changing the system, changing the system is not enough only to change the regime, because probably there will be other people come and will keep the system working. And now we see already these changes starting from November 2014. I put a bit, just to make a funny situation, to explain you the country and the political changes we had last year. Just, you know, like a puzzle, yeah? Last year we had the revolution, the runaway of the president and all previous establishment out of the country. We had a change of the constitution, we have the president elections, we changed twice the government, full government in Ukraine. We had parliamentary elections, so we had the period of also very much a lot of populistic promises, which we still try to deal with them. So this was the year which was not helping much to do reforms in Ukraine, because it's a full year to reestablish the political system of Ukraine. Even we tried twice. And I would say that only from December, after the coalition agreement was signed, after the new parliament was formed, after the new government was formed, I mean, I would say that the reforms started in Ukraine, because many people from the business understood that we cannot rely furthermore on the politicians to deal with the reforms in the country. We need to come, you know, at least for several years and to change the system. And later the country will be better already for our companies, for our children, and for ourselves. This is the situation where we live currently in today. And truly saying, I tell you, today I'm much more optimistic than I was, for example, in October, seeing how the situation was developing. I mean, what is would be not so situation would be not so interesting if we would not have also the military conflict in Ukraine, which absolutely together with political turbulence helps to reforms in the country. You know, we started with, after the revolution, we started with green men taking over Simferopol, and as Sergei said, and as was recently shown on the Russian movie, we know who did it, and we believe me, in Ukraine, we knew it from the first day. I don't know, maybe in Europe, maybe some people didn't know that or didn't want to know that, but in Ukraine we knew who those people, because in Ukraine we don't have so many well-developed army. That time at least we didn't have, especially in that area. So we had this fake referendum. We had after that, already in April, started the same turbulence in Donetsk and Lugansk with DNR and LNR, you know, set up like institutions. Later again, another fake referendums. Later we start having really a lot of the war conflict in different cities. And believe me, we did analysis of correlation between these, each of these conflicts and the outflow of deposits from the market. Considering that there is still a lot of the Russian TV in Ukraine, and also Ukrainian TV was showing a lot about these military conflicts, there is a, the confidence. The war brings absolutely lack of confidence for Ukraine. And when there is a low confidence, people go to the banks and take money from the banks, which also was significantly, increasing the magnitude of the crisis. I would not say it's funny, but it's a bit sad that many people, many children in Ukraine know the names of the cities where there were the big fights during the year. And believe me, I didn't know before last year, I didn't know the names of the cities yet even. We saw after the Minsk I agreement, even if there was a ceasefire, the formal ceasefire was not so prolonged, we have seen a slight decrease of the escalation of the conflict in autumn, which again, coming back to the previous slide, we could run the parliament elections and to elect the government. But in January, the escalation started again, which led later to the Minsk II agreement, which you already not have here. I think you can, this is not well seen probably the slide. As you might know, that the conflict itself is not on such a big territory of Ukraine. Yeah, so it's first it's not full Donetsk, Lugansk region. It's a part of it, but it's a very high industrial area, and for sure it makes all the territory nearby quite toxic. This is one of the last year maps, but the situation now is more or less the same. It didn't progress more. You can have on a daily basis the map on the websites in Ukraine, and believe me, many people look on them in the mornings, like a news. This is a picture for you to understand the reality of the war and the effect of the war in Ukraine. On the left side, you have the Donetsk airport. I don't know who of you was going there to, during Euro 2012, because this was like a brand new airport which was built, and the right side is the same airport after the fights in which were last year. This is the situation which we have in that area with many industrial objects and infrastructural objects, including the roads, bridges, and so the situation is there is very, 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 very difficult. If you go to I could stop here, truly saying, because the Ukrainian economy, Ukrainian banking system, is a function of a war. Because and I think we can find in a consensus agreement, listening Sergei before, that if Sergei thinks that also the war itself is affecting very much the investment climate in Ukraine, and the war affects the situation in Russia, so from the game theory, we just need to stop the war. And we will have the both, it will be win-win situation, for sure, not for some politicians, but for countries and for economies, we will have this situation quite effective. Is it only one factor, the war? Absolutely not. But this is a function from the war. If the war, if the military conflict is not finished, not frozen, and for sure the Russian part wants every time to further escalate the situation in order to keep the attention quite hot there. If the situation will be, let's say, at least frozen, we can focus more on other topics. What we do today, and these topics are not only the war, is a question of reforms and the question of the change of the system, and this is where we are working today. But if to come back to the economic situation, is really the Ukraine today in the perfect storm, and this continues in perfect storm already for several months. After the IMF program was signed, the situation significantly decreased the tension for the short-term financial gap, but it does not help yet with the structural problems of Ukraine. So we have the problems on the macro side, on the balance of payment, and in the banking sector itself. I will show you a few graphs. So the inflation, with the last figures of February, led to 34%. And here we have two biggest factors. One is the pass-through effect of the devaluation, which again was quite high also in January, and with a short lag was already affecting the inflation in February. But the second part, and this is one of the things which makes us a bit worrying for the midterm is that the results of the utilities hike, utilities prices hike, which will happen, which already happened and will happen in future. Unfortunately, it was split into several periods until 2017, and therefore every year with another hike, we will have a big part of the inflation will be affected by this increase of the tariffs in Ukraine. So there was some analysis done by researchers that the plans of the increase of the gas tariffs and energy tariffs will contribute up to a 9% per year to the inflation, which significantly undermine the strategy of the central bank to put the inflation to one digit up to 2018, 2017, 2018. To the target, our target is 6-8% inflation. If we speak about real GDP dynamics, after last figures, which I showed these figures already in Kitzbühel in January as a forecast, while that time IMF was thinking that our GDP will be minus 7.5%, but final figures, which I don't know if they have been already announced or not, just a few days ago, is that real GDP decrease in 2014 was minus 6.8%, with fourth quarter 2014 with minus 14.8%. Therefore, we are significantly below of the drop of the Russian economy, for example, which was in 2008. And not only war affecting that, for sure, also the fall in the global prices on commodities and also the decrease in export, including to Russia, affects the GDP slowdown. This is the situation goes in all the industries practically, because we don't need to forget, even if the Donetsk-Lugansk region, or that area of the military conflict, was a big industrial area. Therefore, its fall down is contributing a lot to the decrease of GDP. It's also affecting the other industries and other regions, because the region itself was a big consumer of the goods produced in different parts of Ukraine, including the food, clothes, whatever, and including services. And today, 1 million of people from that region, it doesn't have a job and is temporarily moved to other territories of Ukraine. 600,000 is the last estimations moved to other countries, not only Russia, but Belarus and other countries. And 1 million has moved to part of Ukraine. Therefore, in each industries we see, in all industries we see decrease of the economy. This is the 2014 industrial output. So out of 6.8%, the direct effect of Donetsk and Lugansk is minus 2.5% for GDP. And you see how it's also affecting the regions nearby. In respect of the industrial production, and it's also continuing, in Lugansk, year on year, February 2015 versus February 2014, the industrial production is minus 89%. And this is industrial region. So this means that almost collapse of the economy in one specific region. Well, other regions, if you see on the left side, is that they are not so much affecting the country. One of the results of the crisis is the financial results of the companies, which also affects the banks, by the way. Also, banks have huge losses last year, but banks during this year, they will have to review the financials of the companies and therefore make further provisioning for the loans. And the losses, or net losses of the financial results of the companies that we have 9 months were 168 billion hryvnia of the overall economy in Ukraine. This means the corporations. The unemployment again increased. The situation with disposable income and real wages is decreasing significantly due to high inflation and factually frozen salaries in the public sector, but also in the commercial sector. The corporations don't increase nominal salaries to people. The budget deficit due to the increasing debt and the decreasing collection of the taxes, and we speak here about the broad deficit, which includes also the Naftogaz, including the banks, including the pension fund, and the Deposit Guarantee Fund went significantly up. So in 2014, our estimation was about 13.3% versus the official, 6.5, whatever. This is, we plan for sure a significant decrease in 2015, but this was a phenomenon of 2014, which was financed mostly by the central bank, because central bank bought out a significant portion of the treasury bills which were issued to refinance the Naftogaz and refinance the banks. And for sure, it affected as well the devaluation in the country and significant inflation. This year will be much stricter monetary policy. Okay, this is some figures on the. So last year we cashed 39% of the expenditures of the consolidated budget of Ukraine. I mean, money transferred from the central bank to the government. Again, as I said, which affected as well significantly the devaluation of hryvnia. Even if we had some overshooting, significant overshooting start of this year, later it went back to the more reliable and more logical figures, which are also embedded in the IMF program. So today rate is between 21, 23 hryvnia for $1, and the problem of exchange rate in Ukraine is that the anchor of the linkage of anything in Ukraine to dollar is very high, not to euro, but really to dollar. Dollar in many cases in Ukraine is playing as a mean of payment, not in mean of value in many cases, mean of payment less, and mean of savings as well. So many people save money in the foreign currency. And therefore, for them, they have in mind the shifts in currency every day. Like one screen during the morning for people is the map of the military conflict. Now one is the cash rates, the dollar rates in the banks outlets. For sure, it's affected significantly, the situation in the economy significantly affected both NDF and the Ukrainian sovereign bonds, but okay, this is the situation, I think, which is also very much affected by the current restructuring process, which is ongoing. As a central bank, we try to significantly change our instruments for monetary policy and to bring back, to use the discount rate, which has never been used as an instrument for monetary policy in Ukraine. So now we already completed, let's say, this set of instruments, and due to the increase also of the discount rate in Ukraine, calmed down a bit the situation both on the interbank market and on the FX market, and absolutely this is not helping to the economic growth, but our target today is to calm down the situation. And the situation on the forex market in general, as you could see, significantly decreased in general the turnovers from the banks, which is also affected by decreases of the industrial production, the demand for currency. At the same time, I would say that the banking system liquidity is quite on normal level. So, and I will have later one slide to show how in general all this crisis is affecting the banks, and the situation is quite different. In respect about the balance of payment, we see today that our current account is almost balanced on the rate of 21, 22 hryvnia, and I mean close to, to really not positive, but it's neutral. While still we have issues with a financial account, and which is very much affected by. Which is very much affected by the leveraging of the banks from Ukraine, and also decrease of the so-named intercompany lending. So the rollover ratio significantly went down on the intercompany loans. As I already said, the export significantly went down, but also together with import. Import is going down because of decrease of the disposal income in Ukraine. You will have, there is another set of like 40 graphs in the backup, which you will have access after the conference. So I don't think you have ever seen them because they were not public, or you could make it for sure for investment banks. As I said, the financial account, as you could see in the last December and January, the rollover ratio for the private corporate sector was 28%, which is a very, very low level. For the last year, we have seen the 65 or 67% as a rollover ratio for corporates, excluding banks. And in 2012, 2013, this ratio was 120, 140, which means that through this channel, we had a significant inflow of money, and now we have significant outflow of money from the country, which is more factor from the, expecting the country risk in Ukraine. I think after the restructuring of the bonds, the situation will be the second factor after the IMF program. Therefore, the restructuring by such will calm down the situation, and we'll see return money to the country. If we speak about the banking sector, again, as a function from the war, you see that we have significant decrease of the deposit from the banking sector, but at the same time there is significant decrease of the loans as well. Therefore, the effect for the bank liquidity is not so big. For sure, the effect is for economy, because the economy does not receive new loans, but the economy is also not so much, doesn't have such a big demand due to the decrease, especially in Donetsk and Lugansk area. Okay, this is the slide which I want to show you about the banks and different effect of the crisis, all these crises to different groups of banks. So we have, let's say, local banks, we have state banks, foreign banks, Russian banks, other local banks, and we name insolvent banks, which is not yet insolvent, but factually they will be insolvent soon. So it's a process, okay? It's a pipeline process. So when we speak about, we identify the quite big problems which affect the banks. A part of the macroeconomy is related party lending, and I would say this is the biggest issue for local banks today. The issues of the corporate governance, when you have the, let's say, ultimate beneficial owner of the bank, which is not disclosed, and therefore decisions of him or her are just avoid any corporate governance rules, therefore just legitimated by decisions of others. It means also by management board, supervisory board, credit committee, which foreign banks could not even imagine that it might happen. But what we see in the banking sector, unfortunately, this is more reality. This is the second big problem. Liquidity means deposit outflow also affects largest Ukrainian banks. Much less the state banks. Moreover, our Shad Bank has a net inflow of money now, being like a state guaranteed. The people now start bringing money to the state banks and foreign banks, and this is more like a flight to quality. The question of NBU refinancing, therefore demand for NBU refinancing from one side and the necessity to return, this is a big problem for Ukrainian banks and the state banks. Again, no single foreign bank, including the Austrian banks, have refinancing from the central bank because they don't need it. The question of the capital, again, is more problem for local banks, again, less for the foreign banks. And then NPLs, unfortunately, is affecting most of the banks, and the NPL comes both from the system and from the, as a factor of the decreasing GDP from one side and devaluation from another side. Therefore, I mean, looking at this picture, the foreign banks should benefit from this crisis by far, and therefore, if they will survive during the crisis, it will be supported also by the parent companies, by injected capital, and they will have enough, the technology, enough technology, they will not have any, let's say, operational issues. They will be client-oriented. In the several years, they will be significantly growing. I will stay a few words. No, I will stay here. This is the situation where we live. You will be able to see the other more detailed graph about inflation, about GDP, about industries, also by regions in the slides. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Vlad. I again try to add some added value to a very interesting presentation, and I will start with and I will also attempt to look a little bit into the future. I will start with showing you also a map of Ukraine, which is a slightly different map from what Vlad has shown. What you see here is exports by regions in Ukraine, and you see here also the major destination of these exports. European Union is blue part of the pie, Russia the red part, rest of the CIS, excluding Russia, is yellow, and rest of the world. And the size of these pies is proportional to the absolute value of regional exports. Just to give you a flavor of what are the consequences of the conflict and what are the likely outcomes of the conflict. We work now with different scenarios. Honestly speaking, we don't think, or I don't think, that there is any chance that Crimea will be returned to Russia. Sorry, to Ukraine. Yeah, I made these mistakes already twice. I apologize. And these so-called separatist regions in the eastern Ukraine, Luhansk and Donetsk, will very likely get some special status. We do not exactly know what this will be the case. We talk about decentralization, perhaps federalization. There may be also something like a frozen conflict, which we observe, unfortunately, in other parts of the former Soviet Union, like Transnistria, Moldova, on southwest border of Ukraine near Odessa. We have other frozen conflicts. So one of the scenarios would be that the central government in Kiev either loses control over this part of Ukraine in the east, and or there will be substantially more independence of these regions in various respects. And you can see that this would mean that a very substantial part of Ukraine exports would be lost. And you see also that a number of Ukrainian regions are very much trade linked with Russian or CIS market. And the loss of this market, which is very often half of the all exports, would be definitely very painful for Ukraine. So I do not have time to go into details. We do a much more detailed analysis. Perhaps a few conclusions for Ukraine. As a result of the conflict, Ukraine will have to reorient economic and trade relations from the Russian or CIS markets to other markets in the European Union or and in the rest of the world. The problem is that there is this high dependence of Ukraine on the European Union and Russian-led Euro-Asian Union, and there is a nearly equal or similar importance of both markets, but these markets are highly asymmetric in terms of commodity composition, specialization, and so on. Now, Ukraine is facing challenging task to implement this deep and comprehensive free trade agreement with the European Union. Russia is trying to oppose this or demands changes or adjustments in this deep and comprehensive free trade agreement. The fact is now that the implementation of this deep and comprehensive free trade agreement has been delayed until the end of this year, and there are negotiations going on what should be changed. The basic objection of Russia is that Russia wants much more Ukrainian products to be, let's say, not freely imported from the European Union, and Russia wants also that Ukraine remains in having these various technical and phytosanitary standards which exist now, and these standards should be valid together with the European Union technical norms and regulations. This delay of the implementation of the deep and comprehensive free trade agreement, of course, results in delay of expected benefits of this agreement, because the pressures on reforms, which were expected to be one of the major benefits of this agreement in the medium and long run for Ukraine, is, of course, delayed as well. And last but not least, there are different estimates of the impacts of breakup of or disruptions of economic relations with Russia as a result of the conflict, and these may add up to $30 billion. This includes various losses resulting from loss of exports, loss of transit revenues, loss of investments, losses of remittances of workers who are working in Russia, Ukrainian workers working in Russia, and the conclusion is that these costs of this conflict are very significant for Ukraine. And last but not least, the stabilization and return of growth to Ukraine will, of course, require the ceasefire or some termination of the present conflict. So thank you very much for these remarks.